Real women.
Real talk.
Real messy.
This is Messy Midlife.
Welcome, everyone, to the Messy Midlife podcast. Hi, Aliza.
Hi, Karen. Good morning.
Good morning. It's just the two of us today, and it's one of those days.
I know, a day of kind of, I think a little bit of frustration with life and balancing all the demands. How are you feeling? What's on your mind?
Same. Yeah.
I was thinking a lot about it this over the weekend, and I was kind of thinking about our text thread from last week of like, how do people work, have multiple kids? Like, how do you fit everything into life that we need to fit in or that we want to fit in? I don't even want to say it's a need. I mean, there are certain needs, but I think just doing those bare minimums isn't really the life that any of us are hoping for, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's like it's so easy, at least for me, to get really overwhelmed by it all, And I think that's where I start thinking about things that maybe like what's been on my mind a lot lately is just like financial stability, right? Being a single parent now, worrying about that. And so having these kind of underlying bigger pieces, right? And then piling on the challenges of like the things with children that aren't necessarily like at that level of stress. But like my daughter, for example, it's like, okay, I'm going to, be out of the house. You want to stay home. Room needs to get clean. Dishes need to get put in the dishwasher. And coming home 3.5 hours later and none of it's done. Right. And that frustration of like all of these big things that are like the foundation of what I'm trying to build on. And then having all these little pieces that just aren't going smoothly and turning into, you know, fights or contentious exchanges, things like that. And it's like, how do we just put that aside? I think that's the thing I'm really like struggling with is how do we put those things aside, the little things of every day that end up just adding to like the stresses of the bigger pieces of life. I don't know if I feel like that was just like a whole lot of rambling. I don't know if it made any sense.
I mean, I think that is
That's kind of where my brain is today.
very
So let's
relevant,
be
very
honest.
relevant rambling. I don't think there was rambling there at all. It's just all of the things that make this period of our lives so messy. There was a time when things not going smoothly was just a little bump in the road, like a tiny little blip. And we're juggling so much right now that these things blow up. It feels that way. And I love that you're asking the question, how, how do we how do we work with that? How do we not let those inevitable things, because those things happen every day for us, right? How do we make those moments less disruptive? What
Yeah.
what mind shift or what can we intention can we put in?
Communication.
What was that you just said?
Like, how do we communicate that? I think that's my big challenge with having a 13-year-old daughter right now. I had my therapy session earlier today, this morning before we recorded. And, I said, I feel like every week with you, it's like Groundhog Day, right? It's like I'm talking about the same things that I can't find a resolution to in terms of like the parenting. And there aren't a ton of parenting challenges that I have, but the one that there is over and over and over, like, no matter how much we talk about it, no matter how much we set expectations and consequences or rewards, like, it's perpetual, and I'm like, "I'm sick of talking about this. I don't wanna talk about this anymore." It's like, how do we get action to be taken, but also not let it drive us crazy if it's not happening, right?
Yeah.
And I guess that can be the case with kids, work, relationships, any of those things,
Yeah.
right? But I think the challenge with the children is, they're children. They're our children, right? It's not a partner. It's not an equal in that way.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
Yeah, I
just,
think I think the inevitability of it is important for us to embrace because
yeah,
we are, especially as professional women, who run businesses, are whenever I come across an obstacle in my professional life, I'm like, okay, what procedure do I need to put in place?
yeah. Let me write an SOP about it.
Yes. Yes. And not let it be a thing anymore, right? And with children, that does not exist. I
Yeah,
am now, and I think you're at that place too. I think I have been eternally hopeful that we're just going to get to that age, and I'm sure that does exist, but we're talking years here, right? Of when the expectation is set and the behavior follows that request for the expectation. And I think a big part of it for us is really accepting and expecting there to not be follow through. And that's a hard thing, I think, for my brain to grasp because it's like,
absolutely.
wait, no, we can do better. We can find the way. We can shift the intervention. We can have another conversation about it. And I do think those things are necessary, obviously, right? Because then we don't want to go backwards. But I think that change with children is so microscopic sometimes that it's happening. We have to maintain the boundaries. We have to continue to implement, the structure. But our adult brains are thinking, I need bigger change. I need to see more.
Yeah.
But they're doing the best they can.
Yeah, well, and I think that, that's the part that gets me is like the ask, right? The ask from children of, I need this and this. It's Halloween. Can we order my costume? And oh, what about this? Last night it was like a text about getting eyelash serum, like, right? Like all the wants, right? From children without doing the things to, I don't necessarily know if earn is the right word, but to be rewarded with those things, right? Like kind of the idea, I feel like in this kind of generation is very different from when you and I were kids. Like there wasn't that expectation that we would just have these things,
Yeah.
right? And I think there's a much greater sense of expectation and entitlement that I'm seeing in kids across the board
Hmm.
now, right? Like for me, it wouldn't have been an option. If my mom or dad said, hey, you need to get those assignments done for your homework. I need to get your room clean and dishes in the dishwasher. Not doing it wasn't an option for me. I would have never thought that way. But so I think that's the part of my brain that's like a little bit baffled about when you're asked to do this task, how is it that you feel okay just not doing it?
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's generational. I don't know if that's specific personalities. I don't know if that's specific house dynamics. I mean, every mom I talk to is like, oh, same,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna ask them 12 times to do the same thing and they still won't do it.
Yeah.
So it's like for people like us and for parents like us who we ask, we get it done. We have a task, we finish it, right? Like how do we settle into that and be okay with it, I guess is the question. Like what can we do to be more comfortable with it and to not have it like freak us out?
Be more comfortable with their inability to follow through.
Yeah. And then and how do we respond to it in a way that moves it forward and doesn't create more tension around it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I am reflecting back on my childhood, and I definitely know my parents had to repeat and their frustration with that. But to your point, completely different, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I had the reason I didn't is because my parents had a very different approach. And we are wanting to raise these, really aware and self reflective, which it doesn't feel like that right now. But but that's what we're trying to do. And if
I know.
we came down on them with really harsh punishment, and certainly much harsher, my parents were much harsher than I am with my child. I mean, the theory is that they're not going to have the opportunity to evolve in the way that we really hope that they do. That's an aside. But I think relevant, right? Because I think that's a lot of our heartburn is, I know that I could be really harsh. Well, I don't know that I could, but I know what it's like because I grew up in it,
Yeah.
and it would extinguish the behavior, the unwanted behavior much more quickly. So if we're committing to this different type of parenting, then
Yeah.
it's going to require more tolerance from us in a time when we don't feel like we have a whole lot of that
Yeah.
tolerance. So how do we do that is back to that question, right?
Well, yeah, then where does tolerance lead to? Like, what's that line? Where does tolerance then turn into acceptance that they're just not going to follow
Yeah.
through, right? Which for me, like I'm not willing to accept that.
Right.
I don't know. I don't not trying to find an answer today. I'm just this is what's like going on and on
Yeah.
and on in my mind over and over.
Yeah.
And how do you do what's right to teach your kids the lessons they need to learn? My daughter was saying the other day, I said, "Hey, if schoolwork is not done, assignments aren't turned in, there's no hanging out with friends after school. Like, hanging out with friends after school is a reward that you get because you've done well in school. If you're not doing what's expected of you in school, you don't get to have that hang time." And she said, "Well, that's not fair." And I was like, "Well," and I thought about it. I was like, "Actually, it's completely fair." I said, "You might not like it, right? It might not be the answer that you want. It might not be a consequence that you want, but it's actually absolutely fair, right?" So I don't know. It's just, I know it's hard to make kids see that. I'm sure I would have had a challenging time at 13 seeing that too in some ways. But I also think holding our ground with those boundaries too is how we teach them in
Mhm.
a way, right? You can't just do whatever you want
Yes. I was just
and expect to get whatever you want. It doesn't work that way in any part of life.
yeah. Yeah. And what if our frustration and kind of the overload that we get to when it's like, "Bah, this has happened again," right? And that emotional, energetic experience that we have, what if that and it makes me, like, cringy thinking about it, is an ingredient, a necessary ingredient in their own growth and evolution. Oh, I hate
I
thinking
know.
about that because we work so hard to be the present and centered and stable nervous system in our interactions with our children. But perhaps these shifts in emotions and frustration and irritability being one of them are actually necessary because it's a boundary.
Yeah.
Ugh, it's
I know. And
uncomfortable.
one of the things I read on Good Inside was, you know, if you have a boundary or you have a rule that really makes your child angry about it, it's a good rule because
Yeah.
it means something to them,
Yeah.
right? So trying to think in that light too. It's hard. It's like I think the challenge is right. It's like one more thing in life to have to manage, right?
Yes.
And that's I think where it starts to, for me at least, where it starts to pile up,
Yeah.
right? And I start to say, okay, something on top of another thing on top of another thing, and so many pieces to manage. It's not only the schoolwork and the assignments and making sure those are being done and the stuff at home and making sure that's being done. It's like everything, and then the feelings and the emotions and the attitude that comes from that, right? It's like sometimes it just feels like this is too much, like this is too much to realistically be able to deal with in a day, besides our work, our home life, our relationships with friends and family. Like it just piles up very quickly. I think that's for, at least for me, and I think for a lot of friends and patients that I talk to, that's where a lot of the overwhelm comes in, and not like almost feeling like a little bit of paralysis with it. Where it's like there's so many things. Where do I really focus my attention, at least in terms of parenting?
Yeah.
Right? Can't have everything run according to plan all the time, with kids, but what are the pieces? How do you figure out the pieces that are the most important and that are the priority?
Somehow we do, right?
Yeah.
Somehow we do. And
That's my struggle, my internal struggle now.
I think we're looking for a formula constantly. I'm constantly looking for a formula that will make my current messy midlife predictable and tolerable and effective and functional. That is, I think, exactly what makes this period of our lives so painful, is that it is constant change, constant shifting and juggling of the different priorities because there are so many of them.
So basically you're saying like the way the way to comfort is to be comfortable with the discomfort.
Sure seems that way. I mean, a lot easier said than done, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's hard when our brains don't work that way, right? Like I can speak for myself, like my brain works in the way, okay, this is a problem. This is how I'm going to tackle it. This is the solution. Here are my steps to get there.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
very logical, very methodical, telling with patience, right? I'm
So
going to be really
wonderful.
methodical. I'm going to be really
Yes.
strategic about this. It's not just going to throw a bunch of random things in the mix.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is
But I
what,
think,
oh, go ahead.
no, say, I guess with what I'm learning about parenting in the last few years is that that method doesn't always work and doesn't usually work, I guess, for a lot of things with kids. So
No.
I'm maybe just more shifting my
Yeah.
brain functioning and my expectations about what that looks like.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
also don't know why I'm holding this pencil today. I have a random pencil on my desk. It's probably my daughter's, and I don't know why I'm like holding it and can't put it down. But side note,
I think we're expecting a linear process, as much as we know that it isn't linear, we're expecting a linear process. We thrive in our practices, in our businesses, we thrive on that linear, at least the business side of it, right? When we're in our sessions, we create and hold space for the messy, and it's perfectly tolerable, and we do the dance with our patients. But when it comes to the whole big picture of our businesses is, X and Y plot, X and
yeah,
Y
it's
plot. And then,
predictable.
yeah, yeah. And it's wonderful. And it is absolutely not, parenting is not a linear process. And I'm reflecting back on that thing about frustration and how I've never conceptualized that before. I've never conceptualized I need to expect frustration to be a part of my parenting experience.
Yeah.
And it's hard to wrap my brain around that because in the same way that we want to, use our operations and procedures in our business to create as much ease as possible, obviously we want to do that in our personal lives as well. And when there's another little life involved, that is developmentally in a completely different place that we are, that it's almost like it's very weird, and I don't know if someone's gonna post, in the comments, like, "I think that's totally wrong. Here's the research to show that that's totally wrong." But it's just a thought that I'm having, and it certainly seems to fit my life experience. Frustration, my experience of frustration may be just as relevant in their development, just as relevant of a need for their development as food and water and love and calm and all of those things.
When I just, as you were saying that, I kind of had like a little light bulb. Maybe the really challenging piece of it now is that one of the ways I explain perimenopause and menopause to my patients is it's not linear.
Mhm.
It's literally you expect it to be like it's like boom, 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 right? And maybe that's the part of the challenge at this point in our lives too, is we're experiencing that on a personal level, right? This nonlinear kind of very chaotic experiment that's happening with our bodies and our hormones and our moods and our physical being and all the things, right? Our brain function, our anxiety and all these things. And I think maybe that's why this feels, I'm going to take the maybe out of there. I think that's why this feels so challenging is because it's something I'm going through personally in my own being, in my own body, in my own mind and spirit. Then it's also dealing with it with a totally other, different, separate human being,
All nonlinear.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
like
you nailed
for that's where it feels chaotic is it's not just me, it's not just them, it's everything combined together at these
yeah.
times.
Yes.
Yeah.
The image that I'm having as you're describing this is, all of these nonlinear things happening in our lives and all of it together just in this bundle,
Chaotic
almost
ball.
like a ball of, yeah. Yeah, all of the different lines in different directions at
Yeah.
completely different angles at the same exact time.
I actually am just writing that down. It's a ball of chaos.
Yeah, a ball of chaos
Oh my gosh.
composed of a lot of nonlinear responsibilities and experiences. Certainly hormones. Oh my gosh, of course. Of course, what used to be a more or less predictable cycle of hormones, which was complex in and of itself, right? The
Yeah.
female hormone pattern is now like,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm interested to see what some of our listeners think about it too and what those experiences look like across the board. Because I think there is also, and maybe this is, I mean, I know not unique to me, but I think maybe part of this too is, you know, I'm going through that kind of perimenopause time when my daughter is going through puberty, right? We're 33 years difference in age. I'm 47, she's 13, which interestingly is the exact age gap between me and my mom.
Yeah.
One of my friends, one of my really good friends that I grew up with, referred to it as perimenopause as cougar puberty. I hadn't heard that before, but I really liked it. And so maybe that is it. I mean, too, it's just like all of these, I don't know what the right word is, but all of these hormones and feelings and new experiences in both of our bodies going through, and we're the only two people in this house besides our dog, right? Like that's the energy that's here, and maybe that's a big part of it too.
Yeah, I feel like you've alluded to that before in another episode, or maybe it was just a conversation that we were having. The parallel process, as different as they may be, may actually be more similar than not, of the child of our children being in this, for me, prepubescent, like just very, very early stages, and obviously
Yeah,
for you, she's in it, being such a similar experience to what we're going through. And I think we can simply state it as they're both in totally nonlinear processes where we can't expect any particular outcome at any particular time. And it makes me think, okay, so if frustration is necessary in theory, right? Like, I'm just proposing this as a theory for myself to help cope with all of it for my child's development. And I think I've fought that in the past because it's like, well, I don't want my child to feel fearful, right? But there's a difference between the emotion of the frustration and how that manifests behaviorally for me. So I feel okay with that now that I've worked that out in my mind. If frustration is critical or necessary for his healthy development and shifting his behaviors with healthy, appropriate expression of that frustration, then what would be the equivalent for us in perimenopause, right?
yeah,
Some emotion that is really unpleasant, because I certainly don't want to feel frustrated and irritable, but it seems to be possibly necessary.
yeah.
What would be potentially the equivalent for us?
I mean, the same.
I think, well, yes, the same. Did you just say that?
Yeah,
Like frustration and irritability? I mean, certainly a color in my emotional
yeah.
rainbow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's like I was telling you today. Like I had this lovely weekend with all of these like dear people in my life that I care so much about, and all this like heartfelt joy. And then I wake up today and I'm like, "Mm, not in a good mood."
Yeah.
Why? I felt my heart was so full last night, right? Felt so happy and so connected. And I wake up
Yes.
this morning and I'm like, like, I don't
Well,
want to.
when you were sharing that earlier, I had a flash of that can literally happen to me from one moment to another right now. Which, of course, I'm sure our children would say, even though they may not have the objective ability yet, to observe that. I know I have. I've
Yeah,
observed it, and revisiting that at this stage in my life is just like, really?
I
Yeah.
know. Didn't we already deal with this?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
thought I'd check that box. Done. Move on. Yeah. Yeah, I
Sorry.
just from one moment to another. And I think grief and sadness has been a huge component for me of this experience in our midlife, of learning what my new body is about. Not being able, as simple as not being able to do my stretches and just hop right up,
Yeah.
because I'm done. No, now I have to do this whole maneuver that takes
Yeah.
so much extra time, and the grief of what my identity isn't anymore, the sense of loss of comfort and ease in my body, and redefining that, and all of the things that were linear for a period of time
Yeah.
that
Or
are,
at least predictable, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
we kind of knew,
right,
okay,
right.
I'm feeling a little bit irritable. My period's it's around that time. It's going to come. I know I'll get through this, right? And now it's like it hits when, it hits why, like it's all over the place. And I guess that's probably the challenge for, I mean, us for sure, and I'm sure for tons of our listeners, is when we're used to having things be within our control.
Yes.
How do we get comfortable without having that control? Particularly, and I think specifically with our bodies, right? I think we've learned in a lot of ways by being a parent and going through life and relationships to realize everything isn't in our control, right? And what's the serenity prayer? The wisdom to know the difference,
Yes.
right? We control the things that you can't control, the courage to,
The courage to accept the things I can't control.
it's the courage to change what I can and the
Yes,
wisdom to know the
yes,
difference,
yes,
right?
and the
We'll
difference.
get that right. We'll get that right at
Yeah,
some point.
yeah,
But right, it's like maybe that's where it is just like the wisdom, really the wisdom to know the difference with how it relates to our physical beings and our bodies and our minds and spirits, and also how that relates to parenting and our children too.
I
And
got
where
it.
do we focus? Like, where do we focus our energy? What change, what types of change are realistic and worthy of us focusing our energy there where we can have maybe an outcome that feels better,
I got it. I feel like it's relevant. So God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Maybe that's our mantra going forward, a reminder to ourselves and to each other, right?
100%.
He'll to be continued, I think.
Absolutely. To be continued at the next episode because it
I think there's a lot to think about with that. I mean, I feel like I have a lot to think about with that now, just talking through that in terms of where does my energy go as a parent? Where does my focus go? It can't be on every single thing. So, what is going to make the most of a difference for her and for me?
yeah.
And what's going to hopefully feel the best
Mhm.
and feel different and feel less frustrating?
Yes, yes. I can't remember if we talked about the radical acceptance in one of our episodes. We might
I
have.
mean, we've talked about it. I don't know if we were recording or not, but I
Oh,
know
okay.
we've talked
Yeah.
about it.
This is reminding me of that because, certainly our goal is to reduce frustration whenever possible. And if frustration is seems to be an inevitable part of parenting and we accept that, then we can reduce the suffering that comes with not wanting to have the frustration, right? So that's the
Yeah.
acceptance piece. So if frustration is inevitable pain and I resist it, I create suffering.
Mm.
And that's how we can lower the impact or the pain of it. Or the grief, right? And the sense of loss around the changes in our bodies, or even the anger. That's a hard one, right? And irritability
Really
when
hard.
when the
Yeah.
previous moment or day was so love and joy filled.
Mm.
This is certainly where I am.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure so many of us are, right? I mean, kind of why we decided to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you and love you for talking through that with me because I definitely do feel, even in this short time, I feel a little bit more grounded and less reactive about things than I was going into this.
That's beautiful. I found it really enlightening and I plan on at least experimenting with this,
Yeah.
next time I feel the frustration and the grief, seeing it as an ingredient in the life
Yeah.
cake that we're baking.
And it might not always be like right now, it feels like it's 80% of that cake, right? And maybe
Yeah.
it during going through this, it reduces down, right? It dwindles down to just a small part of it. So
All right. Like you said, to be continued.
continue.
We'll see you next time.
Okay.
Bye. If our messy is your kind of messy, we'd love for you to rate, review, and follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
We'd also love to know what's on your mind. If you were to join us, what would we be talking about? Email us at messymidlifepodcast@gmail.com or message us on Instagram or TikTok.